Good morning. Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Joachim.
To you.
Blessed be the innocent. Now, our gathering, we give when there's two or three who gather in the name of truth, truth is with them. And we're here to speak about providence. This might be a preliminary conference. We might be joined by others in the future and carry on the discussion, deepen it. Providence and Politics was the title that I had proposed. And we have agreed to begin with a fairy tale or a mythos, a story. And the story, a very short story that I will tell, begins in the 1300s. In the 1300s, you see, there was a good man. He obliquely calls himself a good man. He helps us understand that he is a good man who set out in a writing that he called the convivio, the banquet, which clearly echoes a Platonic predecessor. He sets out to defend his way of life and the way of life of those who are kindred in spirit to him. Now, that way of life he calls poetry. He defends the poet. He defends the poet from an impostor. Now, in a later work of his, which he calls the comedy, the commedia, he introduces a teacher of his, not Virgil, with whom we're all familiar, but another one, whom I won't mention now, but who was a very close, intimate, even physically intimate friend and teacher of his, who had written a tesorito, a little treasure, a book in which you have an ascent to Parnassus, to the great truths of and the mysteries of thought. Now, his teacher he meets in Inferno, in the underworld, and he refers to him as a father, and he suggests that although it might seem that he has lost, when he looked at him, when he turned to him and he saw him, seeing him, the vision of him reminded him of one of these contestants in these Siena festivals where the young men ride horses, and the first one who arrives at the end of the parcours, at the end of the path, has to catch the flag. And his teacher's father, my spiritual father, reminded him of this valiant lad who runs the race and grabs the flag. He's the winner. And that is where he finds him in Inferno. Now, going back to Convivio, he says that some people are stained, and because we're stained, we need to watch out. Now, we can be stained by various things, but one of the things that you could be stained by is your environment. You could be stained by calumny. You could be stained by envious people. You could be stained by slander. In order to avoid it, well, you have to be prudent, very prudent. And he is out to defend the poetry of his father. Now, as we all know, in the comedy of Dante, for indeed we're speaking about Dante here, Virgil appears providentially as a guide, as a teacher, as a master, as a kind of father, although then he shifts into the mother figure. But indeed, and this we find out that he is more of a mother than a father in Purgatory. But it is his other teacher who is the winner. And if we follow carefully Dante's discussions, we find that his father, who had written a book that served as a kind of blueprint for Dante's comedy, his father, spiritual father, had provided. His father had taken care of Dante, and Dante is following in his footsteps in taking care of us. The poet takes care of us, and poetry takes care of political life. Without poetry, political life decays into barbarism, into chaos. For Dante, to speak about providence is to speak about the care of the Father, simply put. He has a problem, however. The problem is that there are impostors who have cast that poetic Father into the flames of hell, as it were, or, in the best of cases, smothered him under the waters of a new authority. Dante sets out to reinterpret, as it were, that authority and to show us that what it seemed to have been an impostor who had displaced the care of the Father, the provideo, the I care in advance. For indeed the Father sees behind the masks that the children look at to see where those masks are leading him. Dante shows us that which seemed to be an impostor is in reality a mirror, a reminder of the Father, of the poetic Father, a calling back of that Father and calling us back to that Father. So the comedy turns out to be an exercise not only in our maturing the virtues of the Father, but also in our understanding that the Heavenly Father is calling us back to appreciate the earthly Father, that the Heavenly Father is a kind of mirror in which we begin to cultivate the virtues of the Father and partake in the mystery of the earthly Father. So there is no reason for the pagan to reject the Heavenly Father, to rebel against him, as Virgil seems to have done, as he says in the first canto of Inferno, where he says that I was a rebel against the God that I did not know. Adds Dante. There is no reason for that. Now, Christianity for Dante is a great defender of the mystery of providence, of a providence that was exercised and lived throughout classical antiquity. He therefore sees no opposition between Christianity and paganism. No necessary one. However, he does see the temptation in act to misunderstand the Heavenly Father as a replacement of the, shall we say, earthly Father. A replacement. This, which he would call a misunderstanding, which he would understand at any rate as a misunderstanding of Christianity, was picked up upon and developed further centuries later, not too many centuries later, and has become today something that is difficult to recognize with respect to what Dante would have recognized. What happened was that some folks started saying that the Father, the Heavenly Father, the Heavenly Providence, is an illusion. And being an illusion, it tells us that the earthly providence is an illusion because it no longer has its grounding. If there's no heavenly grounding for the earthly Father, for earthly providence, and thus for the poetry that is to guide us throughout life, if there's no support for it, no heavenly support, then the one down here fails, collapses, and is to be unmasked as a pretense, as a sham, in fact, mask of, well, today we're used to this, a meaningless life, power forces, power struggles, name it, yes? A mechanism, a mechanical nature. We study in school, we study the mechanisms of life, how things work, whether it's in political affairs or physical matters. Everything is a mechanism, psychological mechanisms. Formulas, structures, mechanisms. Ultimately, it's a machine. It's a mechanical understanding of everything, which means that there is no providence, that there is no fatherly guidance, as poetic guidance, as Dante had understood and defended it. So our situation is rather more dire than the one faced by Dante. We are faced with the rejection of the heavenly and the earthly providence, both of them, and the replacement of those and of providence in general with a new machine. But this machine is, you see, is amoral. It is, in fact, what Dante would understand as mercenary. It does not point to your good. It does not care for you. It is open to everyone. It postures itself as universal. It is mercenary. In fact, mercenary refers to mercification, refers to commerce. It is, we might say, a machinery of that works on principles of commerce. Okay, as a merchant, as it were. It trades with words as it would trade with money, bills, currency. It is completely indifferent to questions of moral value. Moral value is reduced to financial value, currencies. Now, this becomes the center of life. And upon this principle, the principle of the mercenary, the principle of commerce, devoid of any moral telos, you can build a new world. But Dante would have scoffed at that. How is this possible? That's impossible. How can you? Nobody could be convinced in Dante's time that paternal providence was sham, or even more so in the ancient world, that the father is not to be trusted. If you don't trust the father, who the heck do you trust? Now, they could be convinced that the heavenly father was not there, that he had taken a break, coffee break, permanent coffee break. But nobody would have been convinced that you could establish a society based on the mercenaries principle. This could happen only where the mercenary were armored, were shielded, were empowered by what turned out to be called a new science. The new science would establish, create, develop a kind of armor for this principle, for the merchant, if you like, an armor that would enable the merchant to rise progressively to the status of ruler, of guide, of master, of God, a kind of new father. Without modern technology, and there ends the fable, the merchant would never have been able to rise to the status he has acquired, he has gained in our times.
Excuse me, just a question so I understand what the terms refer to. So in empowering this merchant, does this new science act like a kind of earthly father in the sense that it guides?
No, the earthly, I mean, it is, the new science is okay for devils and anybody, and angels. It is absolutely amoral. It does not guide you towards anything. It is simply there, is what they say with technology. If we create an atomic bomb, it's up to the people to a gun. What's a gun? It's up to the people to do it. Now, it just so happens that this whole machinery, what we call the development of technology today, has served as the armor, allowing, if you like, a Trojan horse, allowing the merchant to rise to the status of, well, a kind of new father. But Dante would consider this to be the ultimate imposter. And without being
then the answer to Joe's question is essentially yes.
But no, science, no, is not the new father. No.
Well, it's what the science, it's what it permits.
It allows the materialist, if you like, the merchant's logic, the merchant himself, but the Machiavellian merchant, the merchant who has the soul of a merchant, not just the trade, the soul of the merchant, to rise to the status of supreme guide and to displace any other guidance. And so Providence is out. You have the new, I'm not sure they will call it Providence, but this care is a non-care, because obviously they don't care. The merchant does not care for the customer, just as the hospital doesn't care.
So we cleared that up about the earthly father. I wasn't sure whether it meant the poet or then later the crown, but it turns out it was the poet after all. That's why I asked about science being the sort of the first, the new science, really rejecting the poets, as opposed to, as you were saying, the church not really seriously questioning poetry.
It was not questioned clearly. So we have Dante, who is testifying to a drive that he is witness, a drive, a compulsion to conceive of the heavenly provider as smothering the earthly provider.
Yeah.
And not by questioning its roots, by all means. Those roots were sacred. It is simply supposed to be drawing those roots out and manifesting them, revealing them in the heavens. And so, okay, now the earthly father, shall we say, Jesus' father, okay, he was there, but, at this point, we don't have to worry about him. We have a new one.
Yeah, that as you put it earlier, that the personal somehow overtakes the impersonal aspect. Let's say that.
The impersonal, that to understand that correctly, the impersonal being those roots, the hidden roots of the Father, are now manifest. And so who needs to worry about being a father? Now to be a father means something new. Something new. You cannot be a father in the pagan and classical sense. Okay? You have to be a new kind of father.
Yeah.
Okay? Which is to say that you have to place yourself under the authority of the new Father who is in heaven. And so so those who complained were complaining about the fact that this was somewhat demeaning for the poets. And Dante has said, the earthly ones. And so Dante is saying, no, wait a second. This is a misconception. This is a misunderstanding of Christianity. The Heavenly Father is there as a kind of mirror that will help us recover earthly poetry, earthly providence. And that's also politics, that which makes politics what it is, as opposed to jungle violence.
The soul of politics.
Yes, that which enables us to live in a city, without that city turning into an outright Sodom and Gomorrah, which burns itself in its own corruption. So, but the paternal authority, the roots of paternal authority, to be more precise, had never been brought into question. Those roots will be brought into question upon modernities, or the first moderns, shall we say, highlighting this, arguing that God in the clouds, as it were, the heavenly God, is blind to our situation. And all you need is an elementary school or middle school student to come up with an argument of that sort. He's going to necessarily be blind to our affairs. Therefore, since he is supposed to be the realization of those roots, there are no roots to paternal authority. There are no roots to paternal authority. The Father is not to be trusted. If you don't trust the Father, you have to trust the machine that intervenes irrespectively of the virtue or non-virtue of the Father. In other words, we have to assume that everybody is a kind of devil who is just pretending to be virtuous. And so that poetry really is a kind of mask for the unpoetic, for brutes, for beastly impulses, you see.
Yes.
And Dante was already responding to that, by the way, saying, they will look at me and say, well, I'm in the flesh, they're in the flesh, and they're brutes, and they say, well, then how do you dare? How dare you speak of eternal things? How dare you say that, assume, take the posture of someone who's speaking truth? How is that possible?
I've had a problem.
Huh?
Yeah, I've been in that situation.
I mean, yeah, you are in the flesh. So he says, nobody's a prophet in his own land. And he goes on saying, and so just stay away from people, because he says almost everybody, quasi tutti, almost everyone is that way. It's Dante who says it. And so stay away from almost everyone.
Okay.
That's Dante's advice to the poet. Okay.
I like this guy.
So we'll see whether if this might be these works of mine, recent works might be published where I show this in detail how this unfolds, these arguments unfold. At any rate, as far as Providence is concerned, now we have a worse situation in some important respect. Not a damning situation, nevertheless, that situation where the roots of paternity have been exposed as a chimera, so as an illusion. So we have to replace the father with the machinery. This machinery is the market, the merchant, the flatterer. And if you look at the fox and the cat who go to Pinocchio, in Collodi's story, who needs Geppetto when you have these merchants they're going to establish the new school, and the new school is going to be based on the principles of flattery. The merchant is obviously is the paradigmatic flatterer. He needs to flatter the customer, obviously. Otherwise, he'd be a failure as a merchant.
These days, you don't even have to do that anymore.
Oh no, you do. Everybody's flattered.
Well, have you seen those little spots by the forum? It's just all but saying, you're a slave. This and this and this is going to happen to you. Basta.
Big Pharma doesn't have to flatter anybody. They have government force.
They work together. But look,
Well,
even when it's
they work together, but it's not flattery. I mean, they flatter, but really, flattery is not the main argument.
Yeah,
it's an important argument, but it works for a lot of people, but not for everybody. And for the rest of the people, they're just resorting to force.
But look, these are not two different elements, separate elements. The flattery is the primary instrument of tyrants. They flatter you into subjection, into servitude. Look, you are so wonderful and so precious and so vulnerable, and I'm going to place you here. And I'm going to take care of you because I really care for you. We care for you. We are working for you. I'm working for you. And so trust me because
Marco, I see what you're saying. Flattery and force come from this, maybe the same underlying impulse, the practitioners of it, but the practice is different. One is attractive and has a smiley face. The other one is frightening.
Sure, but it is simply a melting of the wax, and then you see what it's all about. When Pinocchio is flattered into going into the land of
right,
idiots,
sure, okay.
Then he finds out. Then this flattery is transforming him into a donkey, and then he finds out that he is being beaten up. He realizes what is really going on. They've been sucking me into this condition of impotence, spiritual. And then they go and then they start with the vaccines, as it were.
It's we're now into the force phase.
It's tyranny. Look, flattery is the primary instrument of tyrants. Very simply put, they want to flatter you into subservience, into servitude, mental servitude, moral servitude, physical servitude, all three. And that is what happens where, can you hear me? Yes. This is what happens where the amoral, where the mercenary has usurped the throne of the poet. And of course, for Dante,
I don't want to make too big an issue. too big an issue of it. I think I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
except that sometimes you can have this kind of impulse. What we've been living in for decades, advertising and merchandise and flattery and so on. But what actual slaves experienced? No, they were just grabbed up and turned into slaves. There was no flattery involved. So even if it's the same impulse at the base, if you want to say that, there's a
no.
there's an important.
There has to be okay. Take that example. First of all, they were sold by their own. Let's take the American experience. So there was Africans selling their African compatriots, compatriots to these Europeans who were taking them to America. Okay, so already there's a kind of seducing them out. Come here. Yeah. But then more than this, there is the demeaning flattery. The demeaning flattery is suggesting that you don't have to think, you don't have to learn anything. There can be a violence.
Except Marco, again, I don't want to get caught up in something secondary, but for the particular slave who's captured by some predatory group and then sold to slavers and then transported to America, it's an experience of overwhelming force.
Oh, clearly,
and not of anything else.
To the extent that these people were not flattered, then they were not truly slaves. They had to be re-educated. And this re-education allowed them to live as what Aristotle would call slaves by nature. In other words, they had a slavish nature. They did not want to escape anymore. They were flattered into being subservient to the master. They assumed that it was okay. Ultimately, it's something you have to accept. You accept it. They had to be re-educated in mass. Otherwise, they would have been too, shall we say, unpolished.
I don't know. I have a slight problem with calling a process of intimidating and hectoring and beating somebody, labeling that flattery. I mean, I can understand your point, how they're related, but I just that becomes an issue of language that I react against, because then we start to speak at a level of abstraction, which is maybe completely valid, but it becomes difficult.
This is maybe a misunderstanding here. As I said, beating is never enough. Okay.
No, I Marco, I really and truly, I follow what you're saying.
Okay.
It's just.
Then there should be no qualms, I think, because if beating is not enough, and this violent intimidation threats.
Beating is not flattery. In other words, there's a difference between force and flattery, and even if it's the same impulse, if it's the same impulse that is out of which the flattery and the force is coming, they have a somewhat different nature, even if that's secondary.
Paul, I did not say otherwise. I did not say otherwise, Paul. I did not say otherwise.
I'm not saying you're saying otherwise. I'm just talking about. I'm talking.
Okay. So then there's no issue, because if all I was saying is that force is not enough to establish a tyrannical regime. You need flattery, and flattery becomes the key. The rhetorical element becomes the key to the rise of a tyrannical regime. It is absolutely not brutal force that can establish that regime. You need it. You need the police brutal force, as it were, or the guards, or the whatever, the people with a stick. You need them, but that is not the primary instrument of the tyrant. The primary one aims at converting the minds into torpor, into accepting the fatality.
But then an aspect of what you're calling flattery would also be, say, propaganda indoctrination, and which, I mean,
Depends. It depends.
I guess
Yes.
you could subsume that to flattery in a certain sense. You could, the idea, teach people communism or something, and then they can have the self-satisfaction of understanding better than the others, or this kind of thing. So that's, but the impulse of
False
giving
certainties, selling false, in fact, selling for free, but
But
it's never free. The false certainties, certainly, false certainties flatter you.
those kinds of things, they play into a fundamental temptation that we should think well of ourselves. So it's offering different ways that we can think well of ourselves, or ultimately self-justification.
Resting your will upon the authorities. So very often today we hear people asking, we don't know whom to believe. We don't know who, should I believe them or should I believe them? And sometimes I answer, I don't have this compulsion to believe in anyone there. Why do I need to believe them? I don't need to believe in any of these parties. However, in ordinary circumstances of life, for the child, for the person who's perplexed, he needs to believe someone. Who is he going to believe? If he doesn't believe his father, to go back to that principle of poetry, which is to say that, that there is something about the paternal link that is crucial, then it turns out, okay, we have a market of gods, but I mean, ultimately he's going to accept the authority of the market. And that authority has come to coincide visibly with the state or the government. So the two work as one. We have a mercantile state, corporations, and so forth. So, okay, can this stand with sheer brute force? And no. Propaganda, you say. Well, yeah, but propaganda is feeding you these fake certainties. You can have decent certainties, or certainties that are utterly incompatible with human nature, and so that draw you to abandon your humanity. Okay. And is it easier? It's a temptation. You're speaking about temptation. Yes. Well, there's a temptation to abandon our humanity, to seek safety in illusions, rather than facing the challenge of life, of liberty. Joachim, I don't know if you're there. We lost your image. Yes, you're there.
Back. Yeah, my phone was nagging about battery power.
Ah, okay. All right. So, yeah, I don't know where if there are any qualms with that with that precision, that precision, that qualification.
I just trying to think my way into it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that it has all kinds of articulation. People, for instance, a lot of people are confused today because they've been made scared.
Yeah, but they want to be scared. If they do not want to be scared, if they not seek fear, as I said, we have argued about this.
But
it's a merchandise. Fear is
sure.
a merchandise. Is a merchandise.
Well, yes.
They're merchants of fear. They're merchants of fear.
Yes.
Well, of course, the fear is also a kind of pious fear, in the more downhill sense, perhaps, of the word.
Well,
But besides, I mean, if you were to go on the street, like, oh, it's just another year. How dare you? It's just another,
just another what?
just another fine Dutch October, eh? No, people are dying by the handful. Or I mean, how many people you could fit in your hand if you were some kind of Hobbesian giant, per the illustration. The fair is a kind of doctrine, I suppose, to
it gives a people a way of justifying. They become important by being part of this thing.
sure.
They're succumbing to a certain kind of flattery. You can have importance, you can have a certain sort of authority. The people who tell other people to put on their masks and that kind of thing.
It's a sort of moral flattery, yes.
Huh?
It's a kind of moral flattery. You can be a part of the Allied troops.
But it's different kinds. I mean, in the same way that you can say that all sins boil down to pride, but people are tempted in different ways.
There's not all pride is bad.
It sounds like to be proud of.
Well,
there's the distinction in French: orgueil et fierté. Orgueil is always bad. Fierté can be good.
sure, yeah. Some
In
things
English, there's not that distinction in English.
Right. So you have to speak about, there's vainglory. There's vainglory. So you have vain pride that does not have.
Well, just pride in the sense of the sin.
Yeah.
And so when you can have a discourse where you can understand that all sin is pride, in the sense that all sin is turning away from God, and that pride is the direct turning away from God, and so you can define all sin that way. So in the same way, so you can do that at one level, but at another level, you have to recognize sin in all these different forms. So the different ways that people are succumbing to what you're calling flattery, it happens in different ways for different reasons for different people, in the same way that the flattery itself comes in different forms, which, I mean, maybe for you they overlap completely. I'm a little dubious about it, because there can be, for instance, in the world we've lived in for decades and decades, where there was so much flattery, and it was all about merchandising and all about making everybody feel good about themselves because they've got a new washing machine and this and that, and they've got their health insurance and so on. That wasn't totally incompatible with genuine benevolence. I'm not saying it was benevolent. I'm just saying that it wasn't incompatible with a mixture of benevolence. Whereas what we're in now is totally incompatible with any kind of benevolence.
Yes,
it's totally malevolent.
Yes, of course.
Well, I was going to propose before that in the merchant, or the modern elevation of the merchant as supplanting this blind father, there is a certain kind of philanthropy, and what we see today is an extension in how that philanthropy has been applied and understood accordingly throughout the ages since the introduction of this supplantation and this usurping.
Now, yes, Paul, I think, is completely justified in noting that in previous decades there was a compatibility, and so clearly but you can see this also in the various art forms. There was music, there was even new music. If you look at sort of music from up to maybe the 70s or 60s, but okay, 70s, so beginning from the 60s, but still in 60s, 70s, 80s, you have a sense of, you at least you have examples of music that is popular without being outright demeaning, without being anti-humanist. But that anti-humanist impulse, the barbaric, has, it seems to me, taken over more and more.
Also true.
No, well, yeah. Well, when I was young in the '60s, for instance, to me that music was pure devilishness.
Yes.
When I look back on it now,
Yes.
I can see that, I can't call it pure devilishness, because
No.
what came later really was pure devilishness.
Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
can see the good part in it, but I
Yes.
don't forget all that devilishness that I saw in it.
Yes.
Then.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I suppose in that corruption, there was every step of the way a kind of flattery. You can dance and have fun, or maybe
No,
this kind of
that's what makes it particularly pernicious.
Yes. Yes.
Especially when there's a mix, then it's very bad. But in a certain way, even in the most in the best situations we can imagine, things are always a little bit mixed, because we're sunk here in the human situation in mortality. But so, in other words, what we want is the best mix we can get.
Yeah. Well, the some certainties that definitely are capable of reflecting truth. Now, um, we find ourselves today at a point where um, I think people have been flattered into um, into to go back to Pinocchio, the condition of donkeys, and now they're being beaten, and they don't know how to react. They can't speak. They have lost the capacity to articulate for themselves and for others their situation, to make sense of it, and so they're left relying on the despotic authority, the propaganda, the voice from above, the masters who are telling them what to believe, and to accept it. And okay, what am I supposed to do? Be injected? Fine. Here, there, everywhere. Okay.
have another.
Have another booster. A booster for what? To boost
booster
me.
pack, like Pokemon. You buy your booster pack.
Okay.
And one out of the 8 cards you get is
Pokemon.
your deck.
Poke the man. Poke the man. Give him a booster and poke him. No, but this is ridiculous. And look, this is a weird thing. My son, first grade, they listen to music in school. He comes back from school and he shows me what he had been listening to. Paul, your image has disappeared. Now you're back. And he shows me, he tells me guacamole, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what the heck is that?
Yeah,
so he shows me the little video that they had him watch on from YouTube at school to get the kids on track, to get the kids, to I don't know, probably to vent their frustration. I don't know, to channel their passions. So it turns out that you have a backdrop. The backdrop is a kind of computer game image, and you have these marionettes, two young people, boy, girl, I forget, who are moving as computer images, figurines, on this background. The background against this background of a sort of a computer environment. So what they're essentially, and the music is a sort of a computer music, and they're moving as these computer figurines. So you get the sense that what they want is to get the kids used to not only looking at the computer games, but feeling at home within them. and behaving like a little computer figurine who has to get his little bonus, the booster, and then move on to the next screen. So you're into it. And this is for first grade. Keeping in mind, as you saw the video that I produced, that they're teaching the kids that school has as its purpose your safety, and the laws have as their aim your safety. You have to be safe, and you're safe in this world which is loveless and thoughtless, but it works according to the regulations, the rules and regulations of the game, where you get your booster, you get your to step onto the next stage, etc., etc. And you are this little donut, this virtual donut who is right there and and moving around.
Yeah.
And you
Little
get
doughboy.
and you get your good grades. You get your good grades for that. Now that is what, Paul, would be the absolutely incompatible. There is nothing redeeming about that. There's just absolutely there. You're at a point where the human being has been completely dehumanized. They ripped all of his organs off. They ripped his spine out. They ripped his brains. They ripped his balls out, and that's it. What do you have left is a virtual figurine who who would never dare to step out of that computer game. That's an absolute abomination.
So, I mean, you watch that happen and you think, oh, well, apparently we live in a world where that is possible, or at least seems to have gone a good long way. I mean, it's possible to get here, clearly, because we are here. So that brings us back to Providence then.
There's been this complete rejection. It has been somewhat gradual. In the 19th century, Luigi Pirandello had written of characters seeking their author.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the new human beings who are masks, who are lost. They don't know what they belong to. We're masks of what? We don't know what we belong to. So they're looking for the agent who is to carry the mask.
Yeah.
The authors. Where are these authors? So now we have been taught that there are no authors. The author is dead.
They're in the zoo.
Well, yeah, in the zoo. The author.
I don't understand this thing about the mask and carrying the mask and the mask being a reflection, and I didn't get that.
In Pirandello,
Well, what you said earlier also.
Well, the character is a mask. Yes, I mean, in theater you have to wear this mask.
Persona.
What was that?
The persona.
Yes. The persona. And but this persona now is lost in the respect that he is looking for, or it is looking for, its author. We don't know where the author is. It is a persona of.
But the persona is just a mask. So I mean, I couldn't follow the sense of your metaphor when you were telling your myth. The business of the children looking at the inside of the mask, and I didn't get that.
In the question, that's okay. When I don't know how far we want to take that. In what in the context of what argument we want to.
Well, maybe you could just
bring that back up, but
or skip the metaphor and just say what it is.
Well, the metaphor. This is a situation when a character comes along. Let's say somebody comes along with a lollipop. A guy comes along to a lollipop, and your little daughter is there, and he entices her. He says, "Come and have your lollipop," and I got more in my truck. Now, she sees nothing wrong with that because she only sees the mask. But you, Father, you see what's going on, and you see where it's going. And even, you tell your daughter, be careful, be careful. And she says, nothing to worry about. Look, there's lollipops. The guy just asking me to go to his truck to get more lollipops. And she tells me, what the heck, you're a, what do they call it? Well, you're a party spoiler,
Yeah, party pooper.
Party pooper, that's it. That's it. So yes, you're a party pooper. What, stop it. Stop interfering with my life. I want to have fun. And this guy's helping me have fun. So we have masks, but we're told that there's nothing behind. There's no author. So we shouldn't be asking about what the point of this is. So why are these regulations set up, for example? Is there a goal? Is there an end? What is the doctrine that is guiding them? No,
Well, to follow the metaphor, the author controls the mask. The actor behind the mask can have critical distance from the author. The actor is not equivalent to the author. The author is someone else.
The actor. Yes, but the actor is the mask.
Well, right, of course. The actor is the mask, except that if you take your lollipop guy, I mean, he knows that he's doing something bad.
So
he's putting on a persona to get the little girl. He knows that he's lying.
Yes.
And so it's the author. I mean, you could say it's part of him or the devil in him, or however you want to put it. But there's a distinction between the author. I mean, of course, the author can be the actor, but there's a distinction between the actor and the author. If we're talking about the persona, the mask.
Yes, but in ordinary life, we see this all the time.
Metaphorically,
okay. But in ordinary life, we see this. There's a fusion of horizon all the time, as it were.
Absolutely. But I mean, just thinking the metaphor through. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. But in Pirandello's case, he was heralded by many also postmodernists. We have who finally were all singing that the author was dead. But here you have a situation where we have become, as it were, we have been trained to live that way, you see, as masks, without an author, without a telos. We're just there. And there's no questioning about it. Now, we're not just
the zombies.
Zombies, yes.
Zombie-like.
Yes. What is the zombie? Incidentally, in Dante's Inferno, he portrays the prophet of Islam as a zombie, and the Muslims as zombies. And the reason is that there is no poetic interiority. They have repressed that. They have gotten rid of that, and they have abolished that. And he's there to...
They've gotten rid of poetic what?
Poetic interiority. The poetic soul is gone.
So how would you what is that? What is the poetic interiority, the poetic soul, as opposed to
the questions that ascend to truth, ascending, and Dante is even in the Paradiso, Dante, you will find ascending to the highest heavens through doubt. So it is this, you're presented with an image and a beautiful form, and okay, you appreciate it, but that's not enough. It becomes a trap. So you have to go further. You doubt, not through suspicion. Suspicion is tied to fear. Doubt is tied to desire of the good. So you're seeking a good that transcends any form, any beauty. And you go further. You appreciate that form, and you go further to a higher beauty, and the higher beauty, until finally, this you'll find out when you read my work. But
Translated.
you could say that there's a form that is not a
Are you
form.
going to flatter me, Marco, into reading your thing?
Yes. No, I won't do that before
You're selling.
Yes. I will only
You're
do.
drawing me in. You're
Yes.
flattering me.
Yes. I'm taking it to, but I won't be done as long as I don't have it marketed appropriately. And then once it'll be it's $200 per copy, then I'll get you.
Forget New York. You're going to LA, my friend.
No, well, I'm going to China. Okay.
We all.
So that is a situation. We have been trained to live as mass and to forget about those questions. Those questions have been banished. Now, as it turns out, are you a conspiracy theorist for asking?
Me, yes.
No.
You're assuming that there is a reason why they're giving you these regulations, that they have planned this pandemic. That somebody's behind the scene and he's giving you regulation because there is an author. But our sciences have taught us that there is no author. That is just a mechanism that unfolds without authorship, without telos, without any good, without any reason. The only reason and the only good is the machine. There is no transcendent reason or end. Therefore, you are a psychotic, what do you want to call it?
You're a child asking why?
Why?
But the magician priests are constantly giving us reasons why.
Yeah, well, their boots on the ground responding to necessity.
This is part of the machine. It's part of the machine. Your safety within the machine. But I mean, why? Because you have to be some kind of a chemistry expert to understand why. And they will tell you, they will give you the vulgar version of this, because there is you need the booster, because the virus has modified in response to that, and to that, and that element and that mechanism and that chain reaction, and within this game you need the little booster. And that's when
it's still a justification.
It's the machine justifying itself.
Yeah, it evolved, eh? But I mean that does seem to be. I mean, you get caught up in this thing. So does that mean the bloody thing didn't work? Well, I mean, I don't. Right, there seems to be something in it of, we're just on our feet here. At the time, we didn't know XYZ. This is all we could do. We had to act fast.
It will reduce the viral charge. Okay, now reduce the viral charge of a vaccine. Normally it doesn't do that, but anyway, reduce. Where's the evidence? Well, there are studies that have been conducted that suggest that it might reduce.
Oh, right, sure.
And who were conducted with sponsored by the people who made the vaccine.
but what else you got, bag?
Well, look, Marco, yes. Does this lead up to the idea that poetry is the way out?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Where did you think this was going?
Yes, and then you have to buy my book.
Yeah. The hidden knowledge, 12 rules for poetry.
Absolutely. and there will be, but wait, because once you read the book, there will be
a booster. Are there prizes?
No, but there will, once you read the book, you will see that there's a booster. You have to buy the second volume. And after the second, there'll be third and fourth, and you'll be caught up into this. And okay.
And you'll be in the Beijing times by then.
Okay. The lesson, of course, is that all speech now becomes tied up in the labyrinth, or as the great Umberto Eco would put it, or other prophets of our wonderful era would have it, we should relish this labyrinth of words that goes nowhere. We should enjoy the game. Don't worry about where you're going. Just enjoy the ride. It's a labyrinth, and so what? So be it. Kundera, all these other wonderful prophets of whoredom. Enjoy the ride. Get that booster, and get boosted into further boosts. And that's the game. Why the fool will seek elsewhere?
That's evil art.
Yeah, this is all evil. Now, you spoke about pride. Dante is not all that excited about this story about pride, and he sees possible misunderstandings. And what, of course, he places at the bottom of the pit of this underworld of where we went wrong, the underworld meaning the new underpinnings of political life, which is the inferno, is betrayal. Okay, betrayal is the consummate problem. Imposture. Not pride per se. Right? So he wants to distinguish terms. He says, well, if you want to say, well, there's pride. Well, pride, the negative side of pride is to be understood in terms of imposture. Okay, I am positing myself as truth. So this is a great point that my children have understood. So, Paul, I expect you to be able to understand this.
Very Straussian of you. There's a child of 10 kids.
The distinction, the distinction between foolishness or folly and madness, or derangement, or you can crazy, whatever. Foolish man is trying to reach the sky. Why? Because, well, the biblical take on the line of the fool will say there is no God. Okay, so if there's no God, I can just reach the sky. There's nothing to stop me. You look at Michelangelo's final judgment. There are angels that push the people down. They can't reach the sky on their own. There needs to be a metanoetic conversion, as it were. You have to go through purgatory and then come back to be able to be picked up by the angels. So the fool is the guy who tries to reach the sky, assuming that, so he's trying to reach truth. But now, there's something much worse than that. There is the guy who assumes that he's already there. And that now he can lord it upon everyone, pretending imposture, pretending to be God already, to bespeak the God and to lord it upon everyone from divine heights. He is the madman. I'm Napoleon. I am G. He is the madman. He is the deranged one, of course, which is much worse than the fool. Now, we have gone from the fool has metamorphosized. The cuckoo has come out of his foolish cocoon, and he is turned into a madman. The madness of our times is not just the foolishness that led to it.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, the fool who was looking for, oh, we're going to figure out, decode the universe. Now we know it all. We are in charge. We'll lord it upon everyone. This is absolute madness.
That's what I call, following Jack Vance, the criminal artist prophet.
Mm.
That's I mean, there's the vulgar version and there's the magician priestly version of it.
Mm-hmm.
But they like God, with a word, they create. They generate. They're generators of reality. We're all gods who generate reality.
And don't ask why, because it's the reason is in the creation. The reason is in the making. So don't ask why. There is no other why. And if you don't accept it, you're some kind of a deranged. You're deranged, and you're looking for something that doesn't exist.
You're a hater.
You're looking for why in the sky.
You're a heretic. You're a heretic. You're a heretic. Yes, you're a heretic.
And full of hate above all.
Yeah, well, you hate the true God.
You're trying to you're turning away from God. You're trying to deny the creative flow of the other person, their personhood.
Well, most importantly, you are divisive, and divisive is the key to the term heretic. Heretic means the one who divides the community. So you are divisive. Your questions are absolutely inappropriate. They should not be given any space. They should be, in fact, probably banned as heretic. As what are the terms that the YouTube system and Facebook use?
You're a hater like me.
Okay. Yes.
They got rid of me a week ago. You're aware of that, right?
Yes, I heard. I saw. Yeah. Yes. Well, if you ask in an impertinent manner, now you have whatever you had, 1,000, 2,000, whatever subscribers. But you stood up a little bit more. We have on this side.
Well, I really think it was Chinese agents flagging all my videos, and then the algorithm just automatically pulled the station. I think that's what happened. But it all comes to the same thing in the end.
If they go by keywords, you were too blunt. I don't think, I had this old website.
Well, the algorithm was able to understand.
Yes.
What my meanings, and my meanings are evil and hateful.
Yes, clearly.
And they could see that
clearly. But they wouldn't.
But Marco, they're actually right, because as you say, I am divisive because I'm dividing.
Yes,
I'm making judgments, and those judgments they're illegal, they're bad because it's hateful. It's saying that it's saying no to things when you have to say yes to everything.
Yes.
You have to say yes to the criminal artist prophet and the truth that he brings.
Well, there is tact that can be brought into action. When Dante is responding to a situation that is not nearly as dire as this, but nevertheless, there are voices that want to smother his pursuit and those of his fathers. He does so tactfully by making use of those images of that discourse to serve a humanist, if you like, agenda, a humanist in his sense. So, okay. there are objections. Well, let's look at them. And yes, must we speak between the lines? There has to be irony. Clearly, speaking in a persona is key to this. I am not saying it. It is the persona that is saying it. And saying what?
Well,
with irony, it is not easily caught.
Yes, except right, but if we were on an actual, at our level, it's a little bit different. It's
the key I sustain is not Locke's strategy. If Locke, priest, goes to his fellow citizens and tells them that horse is a trap, that again is a kind of flattery. Yeah? We want to flatter you into believing that you have won already. Locke did not understand that people did not want the truth. Simply, they wanted something that was compatible with, that responded to their thirst for fear, that comforted them. He was too blunt. He was not much of a poet, not a good poet. So
I'd like to ask something about that.
Yes.
Actually. So right, you have the poet in his capacity, he has his persona, his public mask. But then as a faithful speaker, as a speaker of truth, he is a mask for the divine, yes. That in as much as he speaks truth, he is it's Logos speaking through him, yeah.
It is speech is the mind that is speaking. Yes, the mind that is speaking.
Yes,
keeping in mind, no pun intended, keeping in mind that there is an audience. That if we are to trust Dante, we are to conclude that the audience is almost entirely made of people who are, in practical terms, enemies of truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if this sounds Christian, that's because that's what the gospel says.
Yeah.
That's the condition of the world and always will be.
Yeah. So what does that say to the human being who is was not a Philistine? What does that say to him? What is he to do? How is he to speak in public? I mean, clearly the Logos becomes a key to his life. How does he to interact with other people? And it would be stupid, absolutely stupid, to assume that you just go out there and tell everyone the truth.
If we're talking about Islam, do you know the story of the mystic who went out to the people saying, "Ana al-haq, I'm the truth. I am the truth." And of course, off with that true head. It was. That's a story that suddenly jumped into my mind. But yes, clearly I understand that the poet has to adjust his speech in the image he makes But I meant more in the sense I wanted to establish as has been before, but in my question, these two masks, as it were, the poet as putting on the mask and the poet as the human being essentially himself, a kind of mask. But how does he know that he's reflecting adequately what's beyond the mask?
What is beyond?
What is beyond the mask? So let's say, in a Socratic way, he knows what he knows.
I'll say goodbye.
Yes.
All right, Paul. And
Okay.
you'll be able to follow us online.
In a Socratic sense, you might say, in his fashioning images carefully, the poet knows that he knows. He knows the art of writing, but does he? I mean, how could he know that he knows what he knows? In a sense of, the underlying the purity of his thought in his own mind. How does he know that to be a pure reflection of thought as such?
To begin, the Socratic line would be that he knows that he does not know.
Yeah.
So here he knows, you could say, to return to our earlier talk, arguments, that he is the mask, and the mask is not the knower.
Yeah.
So he knows that he is not the one who knows.
Yeah.
Now, how is he given this knowledge? He is given this knowledge just as the actor is given the knowledge by the author. He's playing, he's speaking, he's bespeaking the authors. And there's no getting around that. There's no overcoming that. Insofar as I'm a human being here, a manifest human being, there's no way to bypass this issue and to overcome it. As a human being, I am always faced with a situation. Now, who is the author? So Dante's comedy, for instance, which is the education of poet, is at some point seeking out this author. This author, which is the mind that does not err, he states. This author he's trying to reach, and he fails. His imagination fails him. And where it fails him, all of a sudden, he is what he wants. Fails him. He is catapulted by a bolt of lightning into the heavens. These heavens that are the heavens of divine love. Now, divine love, he helps us understand, will harmonize what he wants and the divine will, which is to say that it will justify what he wants. in the face of those who do not want what he wants. Now, if you go back to the Convivio, you will see that he argues that people can be very easily excused for not knowing and not having the power to do things. And throughout the comedy, the Commedia, he is always ready to say that he does not know and he does not have the power. He cannot, in that sense, not having the power to do certain things. For example, to say certain things. And he does not know how to. And he adds in the Convivio, people will not excuse, however, readily, not wanting. People do not want what the poet wants. Now, the wanting is to say the consolidation of his desire. Not this way. Gesundheit. Now, if that is the case, that the quasi-totality of people do not want what the poet wants, the poet finds himself in trouble unless his will is conformed to the divine will. And that conformity is given by divine love. However, divine love, as it turns out, is a heavenly reflection of the poet's desire. So the poet has found a way, as it were, to justify his will, to defend it. No greater defense of the poet's will than the creator of the universe. The author, the supreme author, who alone can truly justify the voice of Socrates, the voice of Dante, the voice of his fathers, is not the divine will, divine love, the God of Christianity. Now, this brings us back to providence.
Yeah.
Divine providence is not something that is incompatible with human providence. There has been now a harmonizing of the two. However, let us be understanding that the divine providence has its own jurisdiction. Human providence has its own jurisdiction. In the case of divine providence, it is fairly clear. It rules the heavens. It moves even what is fixed. When at the end of the comedy, we read of the sun and the other stars, this other is a key term in the comedy. First of all, what are the other stars that are not the sun? Well, clearly they're the fixed stars. The fixed stars don't move. So, the love, the divine love that we find at the end of the comedy is moving, that which is fixed. So much for those who say that the comedy is too static, that Dante's architecture is too static. The whole point of it is to move what is fixed. There are no eternal laws above us that are there to smother thought, impervious to question or to doubt. The divine providence then has its own jurisdiction. Human providence is not so clearly confined. Clearly, it deals with specifics of human relations. However, these human relations are not cut off from the heavens. So there is naturally a bond between these two hemispheres. And clearly there is no human without and aside from this telos that goes towards the divine. So both dimensions of providence, what later would be called general providence and special providence, are at play. Both are defended, and you cannot have one without the other when you understand things correctly. That is to say that the universe cannot be the outside universe. The stars cannot be adequately understood aside from the human being, which is you could also put it in these terms. There's the Garden of Eden cannot be adequately understood aside from Adam. It was there for him. And again, Adam is an image of God in that garden. And an image is another way of saying a reflection in a mirror, or a mask, if you like, but in the good sense of the term. Is there another way to salvage the human situation, the human order, political life, aside from a recovery of this alliance of God and man, of divine providence and human providence? And the proposal that prompted this gathering of ours was no. There's no other way. No other way. And to the extent that we shun that we have left it out, we're screwed.
So, question time?
Yes. We have 30 seconds for a question and then we run.
No, surely not. Oh my goodness, I don't work well under this kind of pressure. Yeah. Donut is.
You need a booster. You need a booster.
All right. So the divine love harmonizing the desire of the poet, and well, I suppose at once reflecting and what is it? The divine love is, you said, harmonizes. Yes, the desire of the poet, presumably for truth, or with
desire for the good. Desire in the good. Yeah. This is what we desire. Desire and want are not precisely the same thing. What I want is a kind of determination. I'm determined of this desire. Yes?
Yes, it presupposes a desire. Yes,
the desire is the effort. The want is not on the side of the effort. When I desire something, I throw myself towards it. I try to reach it. It is a That is the telos, that side of the telos, as opposed to the end in itself. The want is an affirmation, a determination. I want that. And as I want it, I desire it. Now that want is apt for the poet is incompatible, right? Radically incompatible with what people want. People who don't have desire, he calls it thirst, drives.
Yeah, because they don't think I feel that I need something. Why is that? Or something. It's oh, if I have this thing, then I won't have that feeling no more, and something like that.
The problem is not feeling. The problem is they're guided by the feelings and not by reason, as he puts it in they're guided by sentiment. They're guided by the senses, as the classical
Yes.
one.
One might ask a question about the feeling. Look at what it's.
Sure, by all means.
You begin with some kind of determination, presumably. One isn't simply born wise, but one might ask why.
Yes, but that is because you're guided by reason.
Yes, well, you might be forced to on occasion, but then reason may guide you out. That's been my experience anyway. From wanting to really decisively not getting to having to ask. Okay, what's this? Who's wanting? Why?
Look, we want all kinds of things as children. Yes, I want this, I want that, but there needs to be a conversion in order to save you from misery.
Yes.
From misery. So what you must learn to desire. Now, to desire means also to be able to wait and to cultivate waiting. The child needs to learn how to wait upon what before he just determines that he wants that. I used to tell him, I says, look, I want that. And you tell him, wait. Wait, breathe. Now, let's think about it. Do you really want that?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it someone else who told you that you wanted? Advertisement, for instance. So now you're helping the child, you're educating the child into maturing his want. His want is inadequate. Now, the want will always be confronted with a wall.
Yeah.
And that wall ultimately is divine will, which is a kind of authority that transcends and it limits your own will.
Yeah.
Now, most people will use that will as a kind of mask of their own will. And they will say, well, you have especially these judges who present themselves as vicars of divine will. And they will say, we represented vicars.
Oh, yeah,
and we represent it, and we will tell you that your will is sinful. You see? Mm-hmm. And Dante's answer to that is baloney. But what he does is he says, first of all, God is not primarily to be understood in terms of will. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to say that God is to be understood primarily as divine love? What does the love achieve at the end of the comedy? What does the love stand for? And he has trained us from the beginning of the comedy to project, mature our desire, strengthen our desire, and project ourselves into personas. Le persone, in other words, first as poetic muses, and see that those muses will then respond to you. So, this has been an education that has strengthened yourself and your desire. Your desire has come of age and now is finally ready to project itself not merely in this or that persona, but in divine love.
Got it.
When desire has emptied itself out into the divine love, the divine love will very equitably, as it were, harmonize your will and divine will.
Yes, I see.
Which is justified now in the face of all those zombies who want without desire.
Mm-hmm.
So you have been defended by the divine love. Your will is God's will. So there is no incompatibility between what the philosopher wants and what the Bible wants of us, or whatever the God of the Bible says and wants.
I see now why you call that a specifically Christian ground of justification.
Yes, because clearly this whole question of love, he understands Christianity as that.
Yeah.
The Christian God is not the Islamic God, which is primarily this will, or something static and eternal that does not need, does not have a space for this poetic assent.
Yeah, the Islamic God is other in that way. He's not a God you would reach.
Well, it's either, you could say absolutely other and absolutely present. But however, yes?
And as will, yeah.
Yes, it is, and it's law, of course. Now, the Hebrew God is also present as God, as law. However, he is a God of argument, a law that you argue with, as it were. And he, as I've tried to show to argue elsewhere, he is a God who challenges you to argue. And he is not the God of all people that resolves the political problem. He invites you to tackle the political problem, arguing. Yes, he is the God of your people, Now he can be the God and principle of all people, because then that expression can also mean more than one thing, because it could mean that he will be a God of every people who recognizes him. Yes, okay, it's the same type of God. Okay, the God is not just a name, a label, but the same type of one. In other words, the people will relate to the divinity, to the divine in the same way for those people who understand the divine as challenging them to humanity. And a man who doesn't argue is a jellyfish. Is a jellyfish. He's a jellyfish. He's a lobotomized.
Current, Marco.
Eh?
Jellyfish at least go against the current, don't they?
Ah, a jelly bean. No, okay. Thank you. A jelly bean. A jelly bean.
Yeah.
So we have these. They're not the same God. In other words, you don't relate to the divine in the same way. But here you have divine law that brings us back, again, supremely brings us back. First of all, it achieves a defense of the poet. And secondly, it invites us to tread his path. Okay. It is entirely, and Dante, by the way, I'm referring to him because I recently wrote about it, but he begins this in the Convivio. And the Convivio will help us understand very concise compendium of showing you what is at stake. And then this all plays out throughout the Commedia, in the comedy, the education of the poet. Well, so we're at this. This is the topic of our discussion. Providence. A further question to before we wrap up.
So, in a word, well, no, let me not even press it that way.
In a few words.
Nothing in a word. No words. Nothing. So that then is the human return is to tread this path of the poet and to once again recognize divine providence as this love that confirms desire, or that confirms, that invites, in some way admits of, and to that extent reciprocates, something like that.
That calls us to desire. You confirm as a sense of yes, but to understand that properly, that calls us to properly human life. Christianity does not only, the divine love does not only justify poetry, it calls us to live it out, but with the understanding that almost all people will be inimical to that love.
And that's what the cross shows, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
It stands as this thing that would be foolish in the eyes of many.
Yes. So are you going to have a society of poets at the end of the road? And no.
That's the question at the end of Mark, isn't it?
Yes. Well, you just won't. You're not going to have that. You're not building a society of poets.
Yes, a rhetorical question one has long suspected.
Yeah. So that means that the poet will, again, the gospel in an oblique and very polite, maybe even ironic, shall we say, way, refers to the need to speak in two different ways. Okay, I speak to you, you're my friends, and then look, there's a crowd out there, and for the most part, we're talking about a crowd that can easily turn into a very violent mob, moved by rage and madness. I'm going to speak to them differently. Now, I say very politely, tactfully, because ultimately there's not a great difference in terms of how I speak to them and how but it is not clear. Yeah, it's a bit vague. Yeah. What is this distinction really between the two modes of speech? But nevertheless, there is a reference to that, keeping in mind that the Gospels are for everyone and not just for the 1 out of a million. So you can't get away from that problem. So the divine love is there also to somehow, shall we say, sedate the, the wills that are against the poet's will, to enchant them and to give them some sweetness that will appease them as much as possible.
The divine love in Dante, you mean?
Yes. I mean, the divine love in Christianity in general, as far as he's concerned, will. As a matter of fact, if you look at this, I have this article on Statius, and that where I highlight a point in Dante, where Dante is indicating that there is a sweetness to classical poetry, but this Christian poetry is much more. It's much sweeter. Yeah, has much more sweetening to it. That's the suggestion that he's offering us. So, because at some point the reader will ask himself, the careful reader will ask himself, does that mean? Are you suggesting that the real difference between Virgil's poetry or ancient classical poetry and Christian poetry is that now we have more honey? It doesn't say more truth. It's more honey. Okay. Well, that's the suggestion that he throws at us. I'm not speaking for myself here. It's just a matter of highlighting a suggestion that Dante proposes. Okay. Joachim?
Yes?
Last question or a thought about our discussion?
Oof. I'm rather inundated at the moment.
All right. Let us not be tempted to settle the matter.
Yeah, and I'm not ask anything for the sake of sounding clever either.
No, yes. There are too many clever people around. All right, already. Yes, all right. So this discussion might serve as a preface to further discussion on this problem of providence. What we could perhaps discuss further in the future is through questions that are brought up, is how we can cultivate a response to the contemporary rejection of providence. How do you respond to it? How does that play out in our daily life, in our choices, in the way what we choose? Should we go this way or that way? What sort of trade should I cultivate that would allow me to best respond to this betrayal of providence, betrayal of the Father?
You'd have to write your epistle for the times.
Yes, yeah.
In the more general sense of the word.
Yeah. Well, we'll see about that. Okay.
Indeed.
Okay. All the best.
Okay, likewise.